Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. Of course, a very timely event to talk about energy security. Energy security has always been important since the fleet in Britain decided to change their fuel from coal to oil. But obviously, coming to today, many things have evolved. But passing the Saudi attack a few days ago, the turbulence in the market, and observing how things reacted to this massive disruption of oil, the market was not shocked. The reality and the role of inventory. So a lot of new things to catch up. We are very lucky today to have Professor Sujata Ashwarya. It's actually very dear to me, an old friend from the time that I was a student in India. And I learned a lot from her, obviously. We are lucky to have her in Washington, D.C. She's now a fellow with East-West Center in Washington, D.C. and, of course, a professor at the Jamia Millia Islamia University in India. She has a very extensive experience through her fellowships and lots of travels around the world. She lived a lot in Middle East, India. Aside from India, in Israel, she lived and studied and did lots of research in Iran, in different regions, in Iraq. And she has co-authored and edited 5 books, which we are going to discuss her latest book today, Israel's Mediterranean Gas, Domestic Governance, Economic Impact, and Strategic Implications. So she would be the perfect person to tell us about the latest update of the Mediterranean gas discoveries and how Israel turned from being a net importer of coal and oil to exporter of gas, and how that is going to impact the whole geopolitical dynamic of the regions, the trade flow, and the whole energy security of both the region and global energy security of the world. So I'm not going to speak a lot. I'm going to pass it to her, and we are anxiously waiting for you to let us know more about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just begin by showing you my book. This is what I've published 2 months ago. This book came out in the market in June and by Routledge. Okay. What a day to talk about Israel. Things are changing in Israel, and we have the election result, and things are going to change, it seems. And let's hope so, for the better. So let me begin my presentation. I'm going to talk about energy security of Israel in the context of the gas discoveries in Mediterranean waters about 2 decades ago. So the basic outline of my presentation would be, I'll talk a little bit about Israel's energy scenario and the status of gas. Secondly, I will take up the multifaceted energy security strategy. What are the problems in it, and what are the prospects? How does Israel now, live with the gas that it has found about 2 decades ago? So it's exactly 2 decades. In June 1999, the first gas was found in the Mary B. Lees in the Mediterranean Sea. So until recently, Israel was a energy poor country. It is rich in many other things, but energy poor, and it's still probably is still dependent on a lot on energy import. However, the offshore natural gas has alleviated the energy security problem, has moderated Israel's complete reliance on imported fuels. Now, Israel's crude oil production is almost non-existent. It's about 115,000 tons in 2016, which is nothing. Iran's was 216 million tons, and Saudi Arabia's was 586 million tons in 2016. So the crude oil production, and that onshore crude oil production is very, very small, minuscule, you can say. Israel has no known coal reserves. So imported oil meets about 99% of oil demand. Everything that, all the oil that Israel really uses in transportation and in industry is imported. And out of this 99%, about 80% is crude oil, which is refined locally. And Israel imports all of its coal. So, and coal is used in production of electricity. It's not used in any other transformation. So, despite the discoveries, Israel is still vulnerable to supply shocks. Why? Because transportation sector is totally dependent on imported oil, on gasoline and diesel. But there has never been a moment in Israeli history where Israel was unable to supply energy for its economic requirement, and that's also a truth. How it gets oil, we do not know. There is no published account. There is no published data about procurement of oil. It's all a state secret. But we know that Israel runs the transportation sector, and Israel runs on oil, so it does get oil from a variety of places. So securing energy supply has therefore been a major concern of Israeli policymakers. Now, with the onset of gas production, Israeli gas production began in 2004, which and decades of complete dependence on external supplies began to abate with the beginning of gas production in 2004. Natural gas was first discovered in Israeli economic waters in 1999-2000 in the Meribah lease area. Now it marked a new era in Israeli energy supply. It significantly improved Israel's energy security, and this was boosted as more gas fields were discovered between 1999 and 2013. In 2009, Israel's Tamar gas field was discovered, and it is one of the most prolific gas fields in the world. It was a consortium of Noble Energy and Delek Group, which is Israeli exploration and production group. It discovered the Tamar field in 2009. Now another discovery, the supergiant gas field in 2010 was, that Leviathan really makes Israel self-sufficient in gas for several decades. Now, this has the potential to give Israel energy independence, not only abate the import dependency, but really give energy independence. And if the industry and transportation sector shift to natural gas operations. Now, there is a slide. You can see the natural gas fields. This is the Leviathan here. And you have the Tamar field, which is the prolific field that I'm talking about. Leviathan has not come online as yet. It's going to come online in December 2000 or January 2020. You have smaller fields, Tanin, Karish, Dalit, Dolphin. This is the first field that was discovered, Meribah, in Israeli territorial waters. It is now depleted. Meribah and Noah, they are depleted now. So natural gas has become the fuel of choice for electricity production. In 2017, 63% of electricity came from natural gas, 32% from coal, and the rest came from solar power. So share of coal has progressively declined. Out of the total supply of 10.35 BCM, in 2018, 8.54 BCM, that is a whopping 83% was used for power generation. Industrial sector consumed 1.81 BCM or 17.5%. So most of the natural gas is now used in power generation, more than 80%. But despite the increasing use of natural gas in the economy, in power generation and in the industrial sector, there is no natural gas-based transportation, which is entirely fueled by gasoline and diesel. A small amount of oil is used in industry in the form of LPG, a derivative of oil, diesel fuel oil, and as feeder for the production of naphtha, petrochemicals. There is a table I have made for Israel's electricity generation by the type of fuel. You can see that the share of natural gas has increased over the past 5 years. Even 43% is a very large number in 2013. And this became this large with the onset of Tamar in April 2000. Tamar, the prolific Israeli gas field. And you can see the percentage of coal in the total electricity production is progressively declining. So according to BP statistical review, the share of natural gas in total primary energy consumption was 33% in 2018. Oil stood higher at 45%. That's because oil is used for transportation and in the petrochemical industry. Also, some amount of oil is also used in industry. And proportion of natural gas in primary energy consumption has progressively increased. Since oil and coal account for 65% of primary energy consumption, Israel is dependent or energy dependent and vulnerable. 2/3 of Israeli energy is imported. So vulnerability is obvious. Now, Israel is vulnerable also because it has no electricity grid connection with the neighbors. And that's a function of geopolitics. Political animosity has prevented Israel from any cross-border trade in crude oil or refined products in the region that is rich in oil and gas resources. Geopolitics of Israel's existence also implies the management of risk to its to its gas infrastructure of possible attacks by enemies it surrounds Israel. So question of energy security is one of the most pressing concerns of Israeli policymakers and is often equated with national security. So here I have drawn a comparison between 2017 primary energy consumption and 2018. You can see that natural gas the share of natural gas is increasing. You have 33% and 2018 you have 35%. So it has, but still there are two trends that needs to be looked into. One, that Israel is still very dependent on imported energy because the primary energy consumption of oil and coal remains very much in the reckoning. So what is Israel's energy security strategy? It has developed, it's a long-term strategy and it has evolved over the years to counter the weaknesses of energy import. And like any other high consumers, India, China or Turkey, Israel has evolved a very multi-faceted energy strategy or policy. So I'm going to take each of these one by one. And these are not watertight compartments. You will see many overlaps in these. The first is broadening of import. In the backdrop of the vagaries of the oil crisis of 1973, coal replaced oil as the primary fuel in power generation. Coal, that's because coal is easily obtainable and is, it can be stored easily, and it is difficult to embargo. Most coal operators are outside the arc of instability, as it is called, the Middle East and Central Asian region, the arc of instability. There are many arcs in the Middle East. Instability is one. There is a crescent and there are arcs and many other things. So Israel has never publicly declared who its oil supply. So coal exporters are South Africa, Poland, Australia, Colombia, and all are on good political terms with Israel. Now, Israel has never publicly declared who it buys oil supplies from. But until 1979, it might come as a surprise to you, Iran was the primary source of Israeli oil. Now, Egyptian oil fields, Israel also got oil from Egyptian oil fields in occupied Sinai during the period 1968 to 1979, from the occupation of Sinai to the Camp David Accord, whereby Israel pulled out of Sinai. Since 1990, supply has come from Angola, Colombia, Mexico, and Norway. And since 2005, improved political relations with Russia and Azerbaijan has helped Israel procure 70% of its requirement. That is all from the sources that is available to us. We don't really know where oil comes from. For all you know, Saudi Arabia might be supplying oil. Now, Israel has bought a significant amount of oil from Iraqi Kurdistan. And how does that oil come? It comes via Turkey's Mersin and Ceyhan port. Despite the problems, political problems that might be there between Turkey and Israel, this conduit has not stopped. So from Erbil and Suleimania, oil is shipped to Mersin and Ceyhan port. From Ceyhan port, of course, there's the Mediterranean Sea. It can be loaded onto the ship and come to Ashdod or Ashkelon, Haifa, any of these ports. So, this is where Israeli energy comes from, a variety of sources. Now, I think we have lost the. Okay, so there has never been, there is, yeah, it did.
Oh,
Okay, I'll manage. Thank you. So there has never been an episode in history where Israel has been oil deprived. That has never been, ever been. Now there is also an MOU between Israel and US, which was signed in 1975 in the wake of first Sinai disengagement. And it obligates the United States to make oil available for purchase by Israel. So that is quoted from the MOU. Israel also stores oil, has an underground facility somewhere, we do not know, to shield against disruption caused by war or embargo or supply shocks. Unlike oil, Israel did not import gas, not until 2007. Now with the warming of regional relations following the 1993 Oslo Accord, Israel also pursued importing gas from Qatar. Now we know why Qatar can easily, give money to Hamas and how they can easily operate in Israel and Palestinian territories. That's because there's a long standing, kind of talking relations between Israel and Qatar, especially after 1993. Now, with the beginning of Al-Aqsa Intifada in 2000, an MOU was signed and MOU was put aside, even as the idea of gas import remained part of Israeli discussions and normalization. And here I wish to add that during a visit to Qatar in 2008, Zipi Livni, the Israeli politician, stated that the Arab country was willing to go all the way forward towards normalization of relations with Israel. So if we see a thaw in relations between Israel and Arab countries these days, it's been long in the making. It hasn't come in the wake of, Iranian policy or Iranian, emergence suddenly in the Middle East. It's been long in the making, haltingly, but there have always been contacts between Israel and the Gulf countries, always as in after 1993 for sure. Now, parallel to talks with Qatar, Israel also explored the possibility of importing gas from Egypt. At the turn of the century, in 2000, the IEC, Israel Electric Corporation, decided to convert the diesel and fuel oil power stations to natural gas operations. And the government allowed the IEC, and perhaps galvanized by the discovery of natural gas resources, and also that Israel was very much, influenced by the Kyoto Protocol, etc. So Israeli government allowed the IEC to negotiate a long-term natural gas purchase contract with local or foreign suppliers. So what did Israel do? What did the IEC do? After a long and protracted negotiation, Israel signed a 15-year contract in August 2005 with EMG, East Mediterranean Gas. Now this is a very unique company. It is an Egyptian-Israeli company, and I'll talk more about it in Q&A. There's a question on EMG. So EMG was the go-between the IEC and Egyptian suppliers. They are state-owned suppliers, by the way, and they are EGPC and EGAS, two suppliers, which means that the government on both sides were deeply involved in the negotiations. So EMG would procure gas from EGPC and EGAS and then transport it across to Israel. The contract also gave IEC an option of renewing the contract for a 5-year term after it expired. At some point during the negotiation, in which the governments were indirectly involved, consideration had been given to include Israel in the Arab gas pipeline, and I'm just going to show you the figure. You will understand how the gas was, was thought to be transferred to Israel. But of course, Syria was opposed to it, and that plan was shot down. So EMG built a 60-kilometer undersea pipeline from northern Sinai, Al Arish, to Ashkelon in southwest Israel on the Mediterranean. So to transport gas contracted with the IEC. Gas started to flow through the pipeline in July 2008. But within a year, EMG defaulted on its obligation because the Egyptian company demanded a price raise. There were accusations that the gas was sold to Israel at a very low price, subsidized price, and Egyptian people were losing a lot of money. So the EGAS and EGPC pressured EMG to renegotiate for renegotiation of the contract, and the contract was renegotiated. Now IEC signed an updated agreement, and gas again began to flow. So until the political upheavals in 2011, Egyptian supplies were coming into Israel at an even rate. And the supply reached full capacity in 2010, so much so that EGAS and EGPC were supplying 43% of the gas requirements in Israel. So this is the Al Arish Ashkelon pipeline. This is the Arab gas pipeline. Here, this is the internal pipeline that links up with Al Arish, and you have this Arab pipeline going all the way to Syria. It's a functional pipeline. So now this deal unraveled very soon with the onset of the Arab Spring, because this deal was, of course, the target of attack by the Egyptian opposition, attack as a political attack by the opposition. They wanted the government to renegotiate the contract or to stop dispensing gas altogether. In April 2012, EMG told IEC, Israel Electric Company, that Egyptian gas companies had refused to supply gas to it and they had terminated the contract. Now, Israel pulled the Egyptian companies and EMG to the international arbitration and also got a compensation. But that compensation again was traded off for supply, reverse supply, which I'm going to talk about later. Now, now that in the backdrop of the disruption in supply in 2012, Israel drew a lot of gas from Mary B field, which had come online in 2004, such that by the end of 2012, Mary B was depleted. And Tamar was not developed yet. So in the summer of 2012, Israel faced energy crunch. The electricity power supply was severely disrupted. Now, Israel, in the meantime, Israel also built the FLNG to import gas off the coast of Hadera in the north, way up north in Hadera. Now, this FLNG terminal is operated by the Israel Natural Gas Lines and is supplied by British Petroleum from its facility in Trinidad and Tobago. The only energy importer is the IEC. No private, there is no private import of gas from FLNG. And now Hadera FLNG was meant to be emergency backup, but now it's an integral part of Israel's energy security. Now I'll talk about the second, the propinquity of source. That is, your source should be proximate and near to you. Now, the nearest source of energy supply is the Middle Eastern region itself, rich in oil and gas. Until 1970, and today is Israel's archenemy, Iran was the main supplier. Now, crude oil was shipped to Eilat. Crude oil was shipped to Eilat from Iran. And then it was, and then a pipeline, then it was pumped into a pipeline which brought the Iranian crude to the Haifa and Ashdod refineries. Actually, there were two pipelines here. I have just shown this just for representational purpose. There were two pipelines. One was operational, began operations in 1958. That carried crude to the Haifa refinery. Now, in 1967, when the Sinai, what is this? It escapes me. Anyway, when Iran could ship oil through the Suez Canal, how can I forget? When Iran couldn't ship oil through the Suez Canal, an alternative route was found, and it shipped the crude oil through the pipeline from Eilat to Ashdod. So when there was oil embargo and there was closure of the Suez Canal. So this partnership came to an end in 1975, a sudden end. And the pipeline assets that were created by EAPC, this company was seized by Israel, and the foreign assets were sold off, and now it is in Israeli control. We don't know. I tried to look whether this pipeline was still in operation, whether Israel was receiving crude oil at Eilat, but I didn't find much to tell you. So this was what was happening till 1979. Now, for a few years, this Egyptian oil fields in Sinai were another source. From 1967, Arab-Israeli war, to the Camp David Peace Accord, Israel was able to exploit Sinai oil fields, which, according to Egyptian Petroleum Authority, Israel managed to produce 165 million barrels of crude oil in that period and 70 billion cubic feet of gas, exploiting the occupied Sinai, which was worth about 15 billion in today's terms. These oil fields supplied a quarter of Israel's energy requirement in 1978, which is a large amount. With the normalization of Egyptian-Israeli relations, Israel received oil consignments from Egyptian fields, through the Eilat-Ashkelon pipeline, and it substituted for the loss of Iranian oil. And the sale of oil was included in the Camp David agreements. However, with the outbreak of the first Intifada in 1989, this trading relationship was terminated. Israel was able to exploit the Abu Rudais oil field. These are oil and gas fields here in the Sinai. Another instance that reveals Israel's pursuit of energy in its proximate area is a negotiation with British Gas Group that held the license to Gaza Marine fields. Now, there are two fields in Gaza's territorial waters, Gaza Marine 1 and Gaza Marine 2. Gaza Marine, the two fields, and one field, of course, overlaps with Israeli territorial waters, and the Noah field. But these fields were discovered in 1999, approximately the same time as the Mary B field and Noah fields were discovered. So it was generally believed that Israel would buy this gas, process this gas, and also supply to the Palestinian territories. That was the sort of unsaid arrangement. Because Israel believed that the Mary B field would soon run out, it would fall short of gas, so this was a proximate source that it could use. So over the years, however, with the beginning of Al-Aqsa Intifada in 2000, Israel began to block the development of Gaza Marine field, saying that the revenue from gas development would fall into the hands of Palestinian fighters, anti-Israel fighters, and that the development of gas is not conducive to the security of Israel. Now Israel, and also in the meantime now, Israel had made two discoveries, Tamar and Leviathan, the big fields, and it had no need for Gaza marine gas. Now Israel says that it will allow the development of, allow is an important word here, allow the development of Gaza marine fields as part of large peace agreement that it will sign in future with the Palestinians. We do not know when it will be. So we do not know when the Gaza Marine fields will be developed. So this is the Gaza Marine 1 and that is the Gaza Marine 2, a smaller field which overlaps with the Noah field.
Are those being used now today?
Huh?
Are they still being used now today by Israel?
What?
You said after 2009, the Leviathan and the Tamar were used by Israel, so I was wondering...
No. Leviathan and Tamar are firmly in Israeli waters, economic waters.
Right, so I'm wondering if there's...
No, this is Gaza Marine. Gaza Marine 1 and Gaza Marine 2, a smaller field, and this is Gaza Marine. These are Gaza Marine fields, and Gaza Marine 2 overlaps with Noah field. Noah is, of course, depleted now.
How far, how many miles from shore are they?
This is about 15 nautical miles. Yeah. So now search for an indigenous supply source. That is the third aspect of Israeli security strategy. And even during the mandate period, when the pioneers were trying to develop a proto-state, efforts were made to explore the oil and gas fields. So this exploration continued in the 1950s and 1960s, founded on the belief that oil was found in abundance in the Middle East, and soon it will also be found in Israel. But the real breakthrough came with in the late 1990s with the discovery of Mary B and Noah field, with the discovery of fields in the Mary B lease in 1999 and 2000. June 1999, Noah field was discovered, and in February 2000, the other field, the Mary B field, was discovered. So Israeli exploration has continued since then, and now there is about 950 BCM of 2P reserves were discovered till 2012. 2P as in proved and probable reserves, which can be extracted. According to Israel's Ministry of Energy, the natural gas supply could be as high as 14, including the contingent and prospective resources, could be as high as 1480 BCM. Shale gas deposits have been discovered, reportedly discovered in the Golan Heights, but there are problems in the of how it can be extracted, and also environmental groups in Golan are against the development of shale industry there. Why? Because it is a nesting place for rare birds, so that's why. They believe that the environment of Golan would be destroyed if a fracking industry is set up there. Now, discovery of Mary B gas field in February 2000 containing about 25 to 30 BCM really heralded a new era in Israel's energy security. It began producing in 2014, and that marked the beginning of the use of gas in Israeli economy. Really, some gas was used in the 70s, locally produced gas, but that was minuscule. Now that in 2004 really marks the beginning of the use of gas. So when giant Tamar field was discovered, electricity produced from natural gas soared to 43.1%. Now it is 63%. So the discovery of Leviathan in 2010, 50 kilometers of the Tamar, contains about 500 BCM of gas. And smaller fields were discovered in 2012 and 13. And these fields have bolstered, really strengthened Israel's energy security, and also, given Israel the potential to export some gas. And we are going to talk about export a little later. And Israel has already established the institutional, legal, and financial regimes for the natural gas sector. So Israel has thoroughly revised the taxation regime for companies engaged in exploration and production of natural gas. So it's earning a lot of revenues from gas, the state of Israel. And I have discussed in my second chapter of my book how these legal and fiscal regimes were put in place and the politics involved. This is a list of Israeli natural gas fields. This field, they are listed here. Noah and Mary B, of course, are depleted. Tamar is producing field, and Leviathan is under development. Between 2004 and 2008, sorry, it should be 2012. Economy relied on Mary B and Noah for electricity production. Since April 2003, Tamar is the main source of natural gas supply to Israel. 10.35 BCM, it produced 10.35 BCM in 2017, and rest came from the C link, the FLNG link. There are 3 additional production wells. Now Tamar developers are expanding the field, and there are 3 additional production wells that are undergoing drilling and development. Now Israel's natural gas supply is dependent at the moment solely on one source, that is the Tamar supply. This is the Tamar gas field, and it's just representational purpose. And now there are few pipelines coming from the fields to the Tamar gas treatment platform. These are the refurbished Mary B and Noah platforms. And from there, you can see a single flow line carries the processed gas to Ashdod terminal. So Tamar project now, as I said, consists of a system of underwater pipes and production. Then these pipes come to the production rig, and from there, a single flow line carries that gas to the receiving point at Ashdod. So any malfunction in this flow line can have, can disrupt the economy, the power production, and industrial activities.
Exactly 2 years ago, there was a disruption.
Yes, a disruption in November 2017. There was a disruption for 2 weeks. So, what the government is doing is to. Okay. So once the other 3 wells are developed, there is going to be another flow line to the receiving station in Ashdod. Now, gas is expected to flow from Leviathan at the end of 2019. And this reservoir will not only boost Israel's energy security in the domestic market, but also serve as an export source for Israel to Israel's immediate neighbors. In addition, Karish and Tanin reservoirs, which have 60 BCM and 25 BCM of gas, are intended only for the domestic market. Tamar and Leviathan can, production from Tamar and Leviathan can be exported, but Karish and Tanin, it is a gas framework was developed, and within the gas framework, it was agreed that Karish and Tanin will only supply for the local market. Supply to the local market. In parallel, a government is providing subsidy to expand gas distribution network, and it will help the new customers to sign up to receive gas from these 2 new fields. Unless you have contracts, the fields are not economical to develop. You need contracts. So Karish and Tanin developers, which is Energan, a Greek company, they have signed contracts with, and I provided the details of the contract in my book. They have signed contract to receive receive gas from Karish and Tanin. And once those contracts are, finalized, the Energan developers, then Energan will begin developing these fields. So once Tanin and Karish, gas from Tanin and Karish comes into the market, it will dramatically improve Israel's gas supply and energy security. Now, this is what the gas market will look like in 2021, when the Karish and Tanin come online, Leviathan is developed, and Tamar's wells are dug. Leviathan production processing platform is close to the shore because of security reasons. Now this is a network of pipelines that I want to show you. This is the major trunk line. This is the trunk line which carries gas to major consumers, big industrial producers. From here, reception at Ashdod to IAC's Rottenberg power station, okay, and to Hadera power station, and to other consumers in ore, etc. And these are all owned by the Israel natural gas lines. This line began in 2017. It's a new line, and newer industrial consumers will connect to this gas, gas lines, and they'll shift from using, say, fuel oil and diesel to using natural gas.
So Energon's contracts are mainly with domestic users?
Yes, absolutely. Domestic users, independent power producers, and also with independent power producers mainly, and also with distributed generation, cogeneration producers. So fourth is the diversification of energy supply, and it mainly involves integration of renewable energy into Israel's primary energy consumption. That is, increase the percentage of renewable energy in Israel's primary energy consumption. Now, Israel will reduce the use of coal for electricity production, and in Hadera and Ashkelon's power station, and shift to natural gas. Some have already, a few units have already started using natural gas. Use of oil in Israel's transportation sector will be soon eliminated. That's what within 50 years. That's what the Israeli leaders are talking about. And but the development of renewable energy in Israel has lagged in Israel as compared to OECD countries. Why? Because of bureaucratic difficulties, etc. That renewable energy has not been able to really take off. Despite the fact that the country passed the first solar energy legislation in 1980 in the backdrop of the revolution and also the oil crisis of 1973. This legislation required residential buildings up to 27 meters to install solar power heaters to reduce dependence on imported oil for heating purposes. Now, it's well known that Israel is a leader in solar water heating technology. About 85% of Israeli households use solar water heater. Despite this, the renewable solar energy has not been able to take off as much as it should have, and it's because of bureaucratic apathy and lack of incentives, but this is changing. For years, Israeli inventors developed cutting-edge solar energy technology and took their expertise abroad because they found it too difficult to implement their ideas at home. However, this is changing with a series of governmental decisions aimed at generating more electricity from renewable energy. One is the Israel National Plan for Implementation of the Paris Agreement. Now, this has three primary targets. One is to increase energy efficiency by 17%. It calls for the development of renewable energy, and it demands the shift of 20% of private public transportation to fuel-efficient vehicles and natural gas. So the 2016 National Plan envisages that the renewable sources will account for about 17% of the total energy used in electricity consumption. As of 2017, only 25% of electricity is generated from renewables. It is far below the OECD goals. Even that goal of 17% by 2030 is far below the OECD goal of 20% energy from renewable sources by 2020 and 27% by 2030. Now, Israeli government has prioritized integration of renewables to the grid. It is well known that it's difficult to integrate renewable energy into the grid because of the variable production of renewable energy. But renewable energy producers can now supply to the national grid as and when they produce. Israel is also the fastest growing distributed solar generation. Now, for those of you who are probably not aware of what distributed solar is, distributed solar energy is production is when electricity produced from solar is consumed at the site of production. Say a photovoltaic PV installation on the rooftop can also be called distributed solar because it's produced and consumed. In some countries, in some places in India, if you produce more energy, more electricity than you can consume, you can actually sell the energy to the grid under a power purchasing agreement. You can, and then you have a net metering where you sell energy and you can earn a revenue, a tariff. So that's a distributed.
In Israel, that also exists.
No, in Israel that is it doesn't exist. But distributed solar, as in it is being it is growing, but I am not sure whether net metering is there in Israel. In India, I know net metering is there. In some places, in some areas, in Bangalore, in Karnataka state in India, you have net metering. So solar photovoltaic, the largest solar plants are in Arava Valley and Negev Desert in the south. And they employ different methods to collect solar energy. There are photovoltaic farms, and there is parabolic mirror farms where solar energy is collected and focused onto a tower. Those kind of, there are different methods to solar farming in Israel. So solar photovoltaic has steadily grown from generating 30 gigawatt hour to now 1544 gigawatt hour in 2016. As of now, there are only 2 wind farms which were built in 1990 are active. 15 wind projects are in different stages of construction. And although the potential of wind energy in Israel is high, it's as high as 1,000 megawatt. Wind turbines are opposed within Israel by environmental organizations who believe that Golan Heights is the best for farming wind energy, but there are rare birds there, and environmental organizations are concerned about injury to rare birds in Golan. Despite the development of solar and wind energy, Israel will probably miss the goal of 10% of power from renewable energy by 2020. Is now, in 2019, it is 2.5%.
Well, since you made a mention of that, the OECD and their goal of 20% in just a few months, what's their number?
At the
Or
moment,
the actual number?
in Germany, it's 32%.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And what
In
about
2016.
what about the other countries?
Other countries, they are pretty high, in 20s.
Right.
So, and now we come to the fourth aspect of energy security, that is physical security of energy installations. So these offshore gas infrastructure is very crucial to Israel energy security. And therefore, if an enemy attacks these installations, it can be a significant achievement. And therefore, they are particularly vulnerable, these gas rigs, because they are very big, substantial in size, and at a distance from the shore. They cannot be protected immediately. Israel's vulnerability in the north are two-pronged. First, a tussle with Lebanon over the delimitation of EEZ, Exclusive Economic Zone, and secondly, from possible attacks by Hezbollah. In 2016, and why I'm saying in Hezbollah, because in 2016, while taking part in the naval blockade of Lebanese ports, INS Israel Navy ship Hanit was hit by surface-to-sea anti-ship Iranian-made version of Chinese C-80 missile. So it was damaged. The INS Hanit was damaged, and there is a strong possibility. At least the Israelis believe that they are very vulnerable on their northern border and vulnerable at sea. So, in a boost to Navy is not, in a boost to Navy, Israel ordered 3 German-made corvette warships called SAR 6 to defend the gas rigs. It also, Pentagon also approved the sale of 8 Sikorsky Seahawk helicopters. Now, it is assumed that these German-made corvettes would be able to use these Seahawk helicopters. So it is also trying to acclimatize the SAR 5 warships, Lahav, Elat, and Hanit, to accommodate Sikorsky helicopters. So it will have a fleet to protect the gas rigs. Now, INS Lahav is also fitted with a battery of Iron Dome anti-missile system in November 2017, and that adds another operational layer of security to the defense of the rigs. Now, fifth and final is energy relations with the neighboring countries. How does that improve Israel's energy security? Now, Israel believes that it can leverage gas export to improve political relations in the region. So gas is an instrument of foreign policy. Now, gas discoveries, we already know, has made Israel self-sufficient in natural gas supply for many years. So, Israeli policymakers believe that it can foster cooperation with regional adversaries. But can economics outflank politics? That's the question here. Will real politics underpinned by gas requirement and security lead Israel's regional enemies to ignore issues that have bedeviled their relations for a long time? These two questions are very important when export of gas from Israeli shores is concerned. The idea of economic peace, Israeli policymakers have repeatedly expressed their belief in economic peace, that is, by fulfilling the energy demand of its neighbors, it can transform the relationship based on mutual interest, seller and buyer, and also underpinned by long-term gas supply. So if there is a contract, the buyer wouldn't like to break that contract. But in case of Egypt, we have seen the contract was broken, but Israel was not the seller at that time. Israel was a recipient. So things might change. But many doubt the proposition that economic peace is a viable idea in Israeli relations with its neighbors. So where does Israel look for export of this valuable resource? First, direct export pipelines to Jordan and Egypt, the proximate neighbors, and Turkey to us in north of Israel. And also, Israel is thinking of exporting gas through Europe through a lengthy pipeline which will cross the Mediterranean, passing through Cyprus and touching Europe in Greece, that is, through Crete. That is called the EastMed pipeline. Second, Israel is also vying to export gas to Egypt's two liquefaction plants in the north of Egypt, in Idku and Damietta. There are two large liquefaction plants, and Israel wants to export gas there and that gas can be liquefied and sold to Europe and Asian customers. That is one way of exporting gas. Now, Israeli developers have signed at least 4 export gas deals with Jordanian and Egyptian companies. And not that now these deals are, of course, are at the government to government level, constantly protesting against these deals, at least in Jordan. Sisi does not allow any kind of protest. But if there was any leeway, there would be massive protests in Egypt as well. So at present, Egypt is the most important pillar of Israel's export strategy. It is geographically close, and there can be easy transportation of gas through the Al Harish Ashkelon pipeline. Only the flow has to be reversed. But it's not so easy to reverse the flow. It requires engineering, and there have been, constant some, negotiations, and some MOUs have been signed between the two parties. So, and for Israel, the Jordanian market has always been the first destination for gas supplies. Why? Because Israel shares a long border, and security of Jordan is very important for Israel. If Jordan is stable, then there are no spillover security impact on Israel itself. So Jordan has always been, and it's not surprising that the first gas deal was with Jordan. The Jordanian electricity company. So Israel signed an export deal to make use of the pipeline that is already in place with Egypt. And at Tamar and there, gas from Tamar and Leviathan could be liquefied for export to Europe, Africa, or anywhere. So these are the export routes. Gas from Tamar and Leviathan could come to Idku and Damietta. There is the Arish Ashkelon pipeline. Can come directly, can go to Egypt, Jehan port, can also go to Cyprus, can come to Cyprus. A lot of possibilities out there. So Turkey also has space for Israeli gas. It exports gas from Russia, Central Asia, and Iran. It's a massive gas consumer. It consumed about 53 BCM, around 53 BCM of gas in 2018, which is a large amount, which is what the entire, more than what entire Mary B contained, the Mary B well contained. Okay, so another advantage of transporting gas to Turkey is that gas from Turkey can go to Europe through the southern gas corridor, through TANAP, through Trans-Adriatic pipeline. There are 3 pipelines that can send Israeli gas to Europe. So Turkey is an important, but Turkey and Israel are now have locked horns over a whole lot of political issues. So there was, they came to the brink of signing an agreement in 2017, but that couldn't go through because of the Jerusalem issue in December 2017, and Turkish players then backed off. Turkish entity backed off from an agreement with Israeli gas developers. So Turkey is sending gas to Turkey is really advantageous for Israel. Israel can also export to Europe via the EastMed pipeline, but there are many practical and economic challenges to that. This is the EastMed pipeline. Economic challenges because who's going to fund this pipeline in the era of depressed gas prices? And who's going to where will the gas come from? You need at least a 25-year contract for pipeline of this magnitude to be built. There are no gas contracts as yet, and Israel does not have enough gas to send. It's just 950 BCM of 2P gas reserve, which is not enough for this pipeline. And Egypt is not interested in this pipeline because it has two liquefaction terminals which are lying idle for quite some time, which were lying idle from 2014 to 2017 for good 3 years. And Egypt wants to use the gas it has discovered in Zohar field. I wonder if you've heard about the Zohar supergiant field in the Mediterranean Sea, and it wants to run the two liquefaction terminal in the north. So Egypt is not really interested in this pipeline, but it was Prime Minister Netanyahu's project, and he really pushed it. But the underlying aspect of East Med pipeline was to improve political relations in the region. To sum up the quick adoption of natural gas has, of course, alleviated the need for imported fossil fuels and reduced dependence on imported oil and gas. But transportation in Israel is still dependent on imported oil, and that is one aspect of Israeli vulnerability to supply of energy. Second, Israeli energy mix is changing. Natural gas has substituted coal and oil in the Israeli economy. Natural gas has become a fuel of choice for electricity production. While renewable energy has made a dent in the primary energy mix, is still very small, and Israel is constantly looking for ways to develop its renewable sources. While Israel emphasizes reliability and affordability of energy, diversification of energy supply is also very important. And ensuring non-dependent on a single source or a particular type of energy must be avoided in the Israeli security strategy. And Israel is looking to develop the renewables sector, especially solar energy. So export is meant to build relations and boost the exploration and production of gas. With the more export, more companies would come into Israeli EEZ to explore oil and gas. If there are no contracts, if there is the usage in Israel is saturated, even if there are gas reserves or oil reserves, companies will not develop because they are into oil and gas business for profit. So export is also a very important part of Israeli energy security strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ashwaria, for such a detailed presentation on Israel's energy security historical perspective that you gave us, that who were the traditional partners and historical partners of Israel up to now, and how natural gas discovery changed the whole dynamic of energy mix in Israel. She also gave us a very good brief on energy transition in Israel and how Israel is looking into using of more renewables resources, especially in its grid and power generations. Also the export and how the export could change the dynamics of relation with neighbors and national security. And that's exactly a perfect case we like to make for students here. Obviously here is the School of National Security and Foreign Policy, and the aim is to the course of energy security that has been recently started in the Institute of World Politics is to help the students to look into the energy map of the world and energy security plans of the world and countries, and look into different energy flows to help them when they're looking into different aspects of national security, global security, and foreign policy. Because as we were witnessing that how much politics, national security, and diplomacy of countries is very much interrelated with their energy security map, their demand, their supply, their resources, imports, and exports. So I would like to now open the session for questions. And yes, Sid, please.
Thank you so much. Charles Sills, Eurasia Center. Can you talk about the growing collaboration between Israel, Greece, and Cyprus on the oil and gas fields in the eastern Mediterranean, and also the recent interventions, if you will, by Turkey in those waters, and what are Israel's options for countering Turkey's, if you want to call it meddling or whatever.
Israel, Greece, and Cyprus are collaborating or would like to build this EastMed pipeline. Now, EastMed pipeline is, as much as it is difficult to build, but technically not impossible, it requires funding. The European Union would fund this project if it believed that it would be viable. European Union, and there was some talk of European Union wanting to fund this project. But the problem with EastMed pipeline is that there is not enough gas if there is, if Egypt, which has the largest amount of gas in the Mediterranean region, if it is not part of it. Even in Cyprus, the amount of gas that has been really discovered is the Aphrodite field, Aphrodite, and which has about 25 BCM of gas. It's not enough. Israel can spare only 450 BCM by Shema Committee. It allowed only 450 BCM of gas to be exported. So 455 and 450 and 25 is 475 BCM. Every day, this pipeline must carry 15 BCM of gas to be viable. So if you divide 475 by 15, how many years the pipeline would be viable? Egypt has a lot of gas, but Egypt wants to run the liquefaction terminals, want to liquefy gas and send it to Europe, which it has been doing. So Egypt is not interested in EastMed gas. And now Greece has its own problems with Turkey. Israel is having its own political issues with Turkey. And Cyprus has political problems with southern Cyprus. The Republic of Cyprus has political problems with Turkey. So now Turkey is like the bogeyman here, bringing all these three together. It was only when the Turkish option was no longer available that the EastMed really acquired that, really began to be really talked about and became significant in the export map of Israel. Otherwise, the primary, the idea was to export gas to Turkey through the pipeline. Now, this pipeline from Turkey to Israel is facile. It's very easy to build. The seabed is shallow, and the pipeline can easily be built. Turkey and Israel also had good political relations before 2010. So this was, in fact, Turkey's Zorlu group has an investment in one of the power stations in Israel. And some entities in Turkey had expressed interest in developing in building a pipeline from Leviathan to Mersinport way back in 2012, 13, and 14. Really, this idea of a pipeline from Leviathan to Turkey really collapsed with, this belligerent rhetoric coming out from President Erdogan and Prime Minister, with this war of words that is going on. So when that option really doesn't seem probable, then the EastMed came into prominence. But EastMed has its own problems, although doable. But where is the gas, is the first question. And second, who is going to fund it? Where are the contracts? So companies sending gas and buying gas are really not enthusiastic about the EastMed because there's so much uncertainty there. So if you see, there is only about 425 if Cyprus wants to sell all its gas and not use internally. So we're not sure. So apart from technical and economic problems, where is the gas to build such a huge pipeline? I hope that answers your question.
A question about capitalization of pipeline as opposed to liquid natural gas generation plant. Egypt has two that are roughly idle. Why doesn't Israel build its own liquid generation plant that eliminates the uncertainty of pipeline and capitalization of pipeline?
Yes, there are two problems there. Israeli LNG plant. Those LNG plants are huge, and Israel doesn't have that much coastline to build the LNG plant, first. And second, there is a very strong not in my backyard movement in the coastal regions of Israel. Even there was a very strong protest against Leviathan processing platform a few months ago in Israel, which is only about 10 kilometers from the shore. So there is a very strong not in my backyard movement, and Israel is a democratic country, so the government has to take into account the wishes of the people.
Please introduce yourself.
Go ahead.
Please.
Last question.
So I'll make it very quick.
Yeah.
My name is Benjamin Weil, up until recently the international advisor of the Israeli Minister of Energy. I would just say about Turkey two things that, based on my understanding, is that number one, there's kind of competitiveness in the Muslim world in the Middle East, especially between Sunni and Shia, and there's a competitiveness between Egypt and Turkey. So that's also on becoming an energy hub in the region. And the other one is that Turkey feels left out, that there's a bonanza here, and Turkey feels left out, and that's why we see more hostility towards Cyprus, and
Yes.
and that's why we brought the U.S. into the picture to defend Exxon and Mobil.
I've discussed everything in the last chapter of my book, which is about 45 pages, about hostility and gas. Again, Egypt aspiration to become the gas hub. Turkey is already a gas hub with Tanab and the southern gas corridor the potential for the southern gas corridor. So Turkey is on the verge of becoming a gas, the Rotterdam for gas, as it wants to call itself. Egypt now has discovered gas in Zohr gas field, the supergiant field, and other large fields have been discovered of late. And it feels that gas from, now it has also signed an agreement with Cyprus to bring gas from Aphrodite field to the LNG plants in Itku and Damietta. So if Israel is, so now Egypt believes that it can become a gas hub in the Mediterranean. Turkey is of course left out. Turkey came into this game very late because Turkey was more interested in gas in Azerbaijan, bringing gas from Trans-Caspian gas from Turkmenistan, and and the Russian gas coming through through Georgia, and also another pipeline is being built through the Black Sea. But as Egypt, of course, there is political competition between the two countries. Politically, they don't see eye to eye anymore.
If we keep it short, maybe we can just take the last question.
Thank you. Paris Michaels, I'm a student here at IWP. If no one else is willing to pay for 25-year contracts to build the East Med line through legitimate, I would call legitimate contractors, so forth. Now, who's going to do it with Turkey?
Who's going to do
I
it?
mean, who would be willing to fund that kind of Turkish operation? Turkey's surrounding Cyprus with exploration ships every day.
You mean pipeline from Israel to Turkey?
No, through Turkey, the transmission lines that were supposed to go to Europe and other places. In other words, I don't see where the demand and where Turkey has really a leg to stand on.
Tanap is already operational. the Trans-Tanab pipeline, the
Okay.
Trans-Adriatic pipeline is
So why is
very
Turkey
much
messing around in Cyprus, Cypriot water?
political reasons.
Ah.
Now, the official argument is that the gas resources of which were discovered by southern Cyprus, gas resources belong to the entire island, and that southern Cyprus should share the gas resources with with the northern part. But then the Republic of Cyprus says that, well, we are willing to share. It is a foregone thing. But first, let us unify the island. And there have been many rounds of talks and United Nations mediated rounds of talks, but it has come to nothing. So Turkey has a different, different map has mapped out the region very differently. It says that the continental shelf overlaps with the Cyprus's, gas areas and all that. So there are many. So it has its own idea of how it's going. Now the problem is to pressurize Cyprus. The aim is to pressurize Cyprus politically, keep it under pressure. It's not about gas there. For Turkey, it wants to be it wants to be the important player that it believes it is. So all important things happening in the Mediterranean must take its position as a large country into account. It is a Mediterranean country, as well as a Black Sea country, as well as a European country, as well as a bridge between East and West. So it has a notion of self-importance, and especially with Erdogan. So it wants to be a part of it. It's more political than economic. Turkey doesn't lack gas.
Thank you.
That's the
Well, thank you again for being here today and for your presentation.